My fiancé texted me. I found someone else. Deal with it. I replied with one word. Finally. Then I shut down every account I had been funding. 3 days later, his lawyer started calling me nonstop. My name is Sienna Vale. I'm 36 years old. I work in finance, the kind of job where people expect you to stay calm when numbers move and disciplined when emotions try to interfere. And until last week, I was engaged. Or I had been engaged, depending on how technical you want to be. My fiancé's name was Adrian Cole. We had been together 4 years, engaged for 8 months. Our wedding was scheduled for early summer. The venue was booked. Deposits were paid. The guest list was nearly finalized. My mother had already chosen her dress. From the outside, everything looked stable. Inside the relationship, it was something closer to managed chaos that I kept mistaking for confidence. Adrian had a sharp personality, direct, cutting, the kind of man who said whatever crossed his mind and called it honesty. Early in our relationship, I convinced myself that was part of his charm. He seemed decisive, fearless about saying what other people only hinted at. Over time, that sharpness started landing on me more often. Small comments at first, jokes with too much edge. Your job is safe, I guess, he would say while scrolling through his phone. But it's not exactly exciting. Or he would mention one of his friends' partners who ran startups or traveled constantly. You're stable, though, he'd add with a half smile. That counts for something. Sometimes he said things like, I should be grateful he chose me, always framed as humor, always delivered with that same careless confidence. We lived together in an apartment downtown, but the financial structure was simple. Most of it rested on me. Rent, utilities, insurance, streaming subscriptions, groceries, phone plans, even the emergency credit card Adrian carried for unexpected situations, which he used more often than he admitted. He contributed when freelance work went well. Some months he transferred money, some months he didn't. I didn't love the arrangement, but I accepted it because I believed we were building something together. Or at least, that was the narrative I had been telling myself. 3 days ago, I was at work when the message arrived. I remember exactly where I was sitting. Third-floor conference room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a spreadsheet open on my laptop that refused to reconcile. Numbers have always calmed me. If something doesn't add up, there's a reason. People are less predictable. My phone buzzed once against the table. Adrian. I glanced down, expecting something ordinary. Maybe a question about dinner. Maybe a link to a video he thought was funny. Instead, I saw 4 words. I found someone else. Then the next sentence. Deal with it. No build-up. No explanation. No apology. Just a declaration, as casual as canceling a reservation. For a moment, I stared at the screen, not because I was shocked, but because I was trying to decide whether I felt anything at all. In hindsight, the signs had been there. The late nights. The sudden protectiveness over his phone. The impatience whenever I asked where he had been. What surprised me wasn't the betrayal. It was the tone. Confident. Almost smug. Like he expected a particular kind of reaction. I could picture the version of the conversation Adrian had already written in his head. Me calling immediately. Me demanding answers. Me crying. Maybe even begging him to reconsider. Instead, I typed one word. Finally. I hit send. Then I set my phone down and returned to the spreadsheet for about 10 seconds before closing it entirely. Because suddenly I had something else to do. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Administrative. If Adrian believed the relationship could end with a text message, then my responsibilities could end just as quietly. I opened my banking app first. The household checking account was the easiest place to start. My paycheck had always been deposited there before I moved money across bills and savings. I rerouted my deposit to a new account and transferred out my contribution. I didn't empty everything. I left enough to cover anything already pending. I'm not reckless. I'm precise. Next came the subscriptions. Streaming services logged out everywhere. Cloud storage downgraded. The grocery delivery account that defaulted to my card was removed. Then the phone plan. The account belonged to me. Adrian's number was simply a secondary line. I transferred my own number to a new carrier and removed billing responsibility for his. After that came the car insurance. The policy was in my name. Adrian was listed as an additional driver. Removing him took less than a minute. The roadside assistance plan disappeared with it. Then the emergency credit card, the one I had paid off every month for the last 2 years. Closed. Password changes followed. Email, banking, utilities, anything tied to my identity. I didn't send a message explaining any of it. I didn't threaten him with what I was doing. I simply moved through the list like someone completing overdue paperwork. By the time the workday ended, the structure that had been quietly supporting Adrian's daily life had been dismantled piece by piece. I packed a small overnight bag and left the apartment before he returned home. Not because I was afraid of confrontation, because confrontation wasn't necessary. I stayed with a friend that night. Around 9 in the evening, my phone lit up. Adrian, or rather the last few hours of Adrian having a working phone. His message read, "Why isn't my phone working?" A few minutes later, another message arrived. The grocery order didn't go through either. Then another. "Did you mess with the accounts?" There was a pause, and then the tone shifted. "This is immature, Sienna." I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I locked the phone and set it on the table. The next morning, the messages multiplied. Calls from unknown numbers. Emails accusing me of overreacting. Adrian moved through the predictable stages with impressive speed. First irritation, then insults, then something that tried to sound reasonable. "Couples get through worse than this," one message said. Another read, "You're proving my point about your insecurity." I didn't respond to any of them. Silence, I've learned, is often the most accurate answer. By the third day, a new number began appearing on my phone. Local area code. Professional voicemail tone. "Hello, Ms. Vale. My name is Daniel Harper. I represent Adrian Cole in a domestic financial dispute. I'd like to speak with you regarding shared assets and the abrupt withdrawal of support." Shared assets. Support. I listened to the message twice before calling back. Not because I was worried, because I was curious. The lawyer answered on the second ring. His voice was polite in the way professionals are when they believe they have leverage. I kept the conversation short. I told him Adrian and I were not married. I told him there was no joint lease, no prenuptial agreement, no written expectation of financial support. Every account I had closed was in my name and funded by me. Then I asked a simple question. "On what legal basis are you contacting me?" There was a pause. Not dramatic, calculating. He asked if I would be willing to meet and discuss things amicably. I told him I preferred written communication only. Then I ended the call. An hour later, Adrian sent a long email. The tone was different this time. No insults, no arrogance, just a careful rewriting of events. He said he hadn't meant the message literally. He said he was emotional. He said he assumed we would talk. He also included a list of expenses he believed I should continue covering temporarily. Rent, utilities, phone, groceries. He called it transitional support. Reading that phrase was the moment something clicked cleanly into place in my mind. This wasn't heartbreak. It was entitlement. I replied once. Just a few sentences. The engagement was over. There would be no further financial support. All communication should go through his lawyer. Then I blocked Adrian's number again. Within the hour, the lawyer called back. And this time his voice sounded different. Careful. Measured. Like someone who had just realized the story he'd been told might not be the full one. Outside my friend Claire's apartment window, the city lights flickered on as evening settled in. For the first time since the message arrived, I leaned back and allowed myself a slow breath. Not relief, not sadness. Something simpler. Clarity. And Adrian Cole had absolutely no idea how expensive that clarity was about to become. Within an hour of my reply, Adrian's lawyer called again. This time his tone had changed. When he spoke earlier, there had been quiet confidence in his voice, the kind that suggests someone believes they are walking into a negotiation with leverage. Now that confidence had softened into something more careful. Measured. "Ms. Vale," he said, "do you have a few minutes to discuss the situation?" I was sitting at the kitchen table in my friend Claire's apartment, laptop open, emails from work scrolling across the screen. I let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. "No," I said calmly, "but you're welcome to send any concerns in writing." He hesitated as if recalculating something. "Very well," he replied. "I'll follow up by email." The message arrived about 15 minutes later. It was shorter than I expected. No accusations, no demands, just a list of questions. Was there a joint lease agreement? Were there shared bank accounts with contractual obligations? Had I ever provided written assurance of continued financial support? Were any wedding expenses jointly funded? The shift in tone told me everything I needed to know. He had reviewed the situation and realized there was no legal foundation beneath Adrian's complaints. This wasn't a dispute. It was noise. Around the same time, Adrian managed to contact me again. Not through his phone. That line had already been disconnected. He used a friend's number to message me on social media before I could block that as well. "Are you seriously doing this?" Then another message. "You're trying to ruin my life." A third followed almost immediately. All I did was tell you the truth. I read them without emotion. In Adrian's version of events, honesty had become the offense and consequences had become cruelty. The final message before I blocked the account read, "Real women don't abandon men when things get hard." I took screenshots before closing the conversation. When people start rewriting reality, documentation becomes useful. That evening, I returned to the apartment while Adrian was out. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and someone's dinner cooking down the hall. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that happens before people settle in for the night. For a moment, I stood in the doorway of the apartment we had shared for nearly 2 years. It looked exactly the same. The couch where Adrian spent hours scrolling through videos. The small dining table where we had once planned vacations. The framed photo from our engagement party still hanging on the wall. 4 years of memories, sitting quietly in a room that suddenly felt unfamiliar. I moved through the space methodically. Clothes first. Documents. Electronics. Everything that clearly belonged to me went into 2 suitcases and a small box. Before leaving, I photographed every room. Kitchen counters. Living room. Bedroom. Bathroom. Clean. Undamaged. Exactly as they should be. It wasn't paranoia, just preparation. When I finished, I placed my key on the kitchen counter. For a moment, I looked around the apartment one last time, not with nostalgia, with distance. Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. The next morning, Adrian's lawyer emailed again. The subject line read, "Request for mediation discussion." The message itself was polite. His client, he explained, felt blindsided and destabilized by the sudden withdrawal of financial support. They hoped mediation could resolve the matter amicably and prevent escalation. I read the email twice. Then I laughed quietly. There was nothing to mediate. No shared property. No legal obligation. No future left to negotiate. I replied with a short message. The engagement had been terminated by Adrian's text. No marriage had occurred. No joint assets existed. I would not be participating in mediation. If Adrian needed to retrieve personal belongings, communication could continue in writing to coordinate pickup. That was all. About 2 hours later, Adrian lost whatever restraint he had left. A new email arrived directly from his account before I had time to block it. It was long, angry, accusatory. He called me heartless. Said I was punishing him for being honest. Said the woman he had met would never treat him the way I was treating him. The irony almost made me smile. What Adrian still didn't understand was simple. The moment he wrote, "I found someone else, deal with it," he stopped being my responsibility. I didn't owe him comfort. I didn't owe him stability. And I certainly didn't owe him financial support. The first practical consequence arrived the following morning. An automated email reminder about rent. The message had always gone to both of us, though I had been the one paying it every month. Adrian forwarded the reminder to me almost immediately. "This is due tomorrow," he wrote. "What are you doing?" I did nothing. Later that afternoon, another problem appeared. Adrian tried to request roadside assistance after his car battery failed. The app wouldn't load. Customer service informed him he was no longer covered under the policy. He called one of our mutual friends in a panic. That friend called me carefully. "Hey, I don't want to get involved," she said. "But Adrian says his insurance isn't working." "That's correct," I replied. There was a pause on the line. "Oh." She didn't ask anything else. By the end of the day, Adrian's tone changed again. The anger faded. In its place was uncertainty. Another email arrived that evening, shorter this time. "What exactly are you planning to do here?" I didn't respond. Meanwhile, Adrian's lawyer had begun asking his own questions. Questions Adrian apparently couldn't answer. Lease agreements, shared accounts, written promises, evidence of financial dependency. None of it existed. And once the lawyer understood that, his strategy changed again. Late that night, another email arrived. This one was different. No references to disputes. No mention of mediation. Just a request. Would I consider temporary financial assistance to help Adrian avoid immediate hardship while he arranged alternative living expenses? I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I typed a single sentence. There is no legal or moral obligation for continued support after termination initiated by your client. I pressed send. And that was the end of the calls. No more voicemails. No more legal language. Just silence. A week later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Adrian was moving out of the apartment. Not upgrading. Downsizing. Staying temporarily with a friend while he figured things out. Apparently, he had started selling a few things online. A watch he once called an investment. A jacket he had bought the year before. The irony didn't surprise me. That same afternoon, I canceled the wedding. The venue kept the deposit. The caterer kept theirs too. It was expensive, but the cost felt strangely clean, like paying tuition for a lesson you were fortunate enough to learn early. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. What I felt was simpler. The kind of calm that comes when you stop arguing with reality. But Adrian wasn't finished trying, because when financial pressure didn't work, he turned somewhere else. Public pressure. The first message came from someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. "Hey, I heard things ended between you two. Are you okay?" The wording was careful. Too careful. People only phrase questions like that when they've already heard a version of the story. "I'm fine," I replied. That should have ended the conversation. Instead, the follow-up came immediately. Adrian said things got complicated financially. There it was. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply closed the message and moved on with my evening, because I understood the strategy. When someone loses leverage privately, they try to create it publicly. Over the next 2 days, the pattern repeated. A distant acquaintance asked if everything was all right. A mutual friend called to check in. That phrase always sounds neutral. It rarely is. Claire was the one who eventually showed me the source. She was scrolling through her phone on the couch when she frowned. You might want to see this. Adrian had posted a black background with white text. One of those vague quote graphics people use when they want sympathy without naming names. The worst betrayal isn't cheating. It's when someone abandons you when you're already broken. Below it were comments. Stay strong. You deserve better. Heart emojis. Claire glanced at me. Do you want to respond? I shook my head. No. She studied my face for a moment. You're surprisingly calm. That post says more about him than any reply would. And that was true. Without conflict, stories like that lose momentum. Within a week, the post slowed. The messages stopped. The noise faded. Life settled again. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to work. 1 bedroom. Minimal furniture. Clean lines. Everything inside belonged to me. No negotiations about space. No unfinished arguments hiding in the corners. The first night I slept there, I realized something. I slept better than I had in months. No background tension. No quiet disagreements replaying themselves in the middle of the night. Just sleep. Friends asked how I was holding up. Some expected sadness. Others expected anger. I'm relieved, I told them. Not because the relationship ended, because it ended clearly. No months of bargaining. No slow collapse. Just a line drawn in a single moment. Weeks later, I replayed Adrian's text again in my head. Not with anger. With understanding. He hadn't expected this relationship to end. He had expected a negotiation. Drama. Emotion. A fight that eventually circled back to the same arrangement. He believed the stability I provided would still be there afterward. When that assumption failed, everything else unraveled. That realization changed how I saw the entire relationship. It wasn't one impulsive decision. It was a belief. And once I understood that, nothing about the ending felt confusing anymore. Months later, I heard one final update. Adrian had moved to another city for work. Starting over, apparently. When I heard that, I felt something close to peace. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Just distance. Adrian wasn't a villain. He was a lesson. Where I am now is simple. I'm single, stable, and not confused about what happened. Because what ended the relationship wasn't my response. It was Adrian's certainty that he could discard me without consequences and still keep the benefits. I didn't punish him. I stopped subsidizing disrespect. And once I did that, the rest resolved itself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't dramatic at all. You don't raise your voice. You don't argue. You simply align your actions with reality. And step out of the way. Because once you do that, the structure either stands on its own, or it collapses without you holding it up.